We're going to talk all about Morning Basket today and take a look at how I'm doing Morning Basket this year and this month. What is Morning Basket? Does it have to be in the morning? How could I figure out what are the best kinds of literature to put in my Morning Basket? How could I include Charlotte Mason components as well? We're going to talk about that. And what are some ways I could efficiently use my Morning Basket? Like how often, how many books, for how long, that type of thing. I'm going to share with you some techniques on that, including looping basket. What is a looping basket? I'm also going to share some memory aids that will help you to remember the key things that should be in your morning basket, or could be, because it's completely optional. And I'm going to be sharing an acronym to help you remember, or another memory aid called truth, goodness, and beauty, those three categories, and how those could help you as well. So I hope you have a pen and paper. You might want to take some notes, or at least stay tuned till the end, because I'm going to answer all those questions and show you inside our morning basket. Okay, so first, what is a morning basket? Just in case there's someone who just isn't quite sure. Well, it's simple. It's just a basket with books that you want to read to your kids. And that could be the end of it right there. But I want to share with you how you could turn your morning basket into much more than that, or keep it as simple as you want it to be. It could become, in a sense, like a catch-all for those key pieces of literature, as well as Charlotte Mason components if you are a Charlotte Mason-inspired homeschooler. So that's a morning basket. Now, does it have to be in the morning? Well, of course not, right? I mean, we could do things however we want, right? And I found that in the preschool and kindergarten years, it didn't always work in the morning for me. And we ended up doing it at lunchtime. And so, well, it just felt weird calling it a morning basket. So I called it lunch and literature basket, or lunch and learning time, and I did it then. So you could really just do whatever works for you. So now that we have those questions out of the way, what are some ways that you could decide what to put in your morning basket? Okay, so here's the acronym that I mentioned I'd share. This is what I developed that has really helped me to feel like I can get all the key kinds of literature I want in my basket. All right, so here it is. I use the days of the week to help me remember the key pieces of literature. The letters for the days in the week match up with at least two kinds of literature or a Charlotte Mason component. So I'm going to go from Monday to Friday. M for Monday, I remember to put missionary stories and music study as my Charlotte Mason component, which would not be every Monday. I just want to point out that this is not necessarily an acronym I use to follow as far as like I have to do it on that day of the week. I tried it that way, it didn't always work. So what I do instead is use it as a memory aid, just to initially help me remember what things I want in my basket that year. Okay, so M, missionary and music study. Tuesday, the T reminds me to have in my basket poetry, a poetry book, and a history book. And then the W for Wednesday reminds me to have wisdom literature, which would fall under the Charlotte Mason component of habit training. So that would be things like a book of select stories that would help your child to grow in their character or habits, maybe related to Proverbs as well. And then the W in wisdom also reminds me of the word words. So I think of language arts books that I could have in my basket, maybe a book of idioms or a book of grammar. Perhaps it could be a book of homonyms or any other language arts related book. All right, Thursday, the TH in Thursday reminds me to have in my basket some type of theology book for my kids. Last year, the year before, I used Theology by Mikowski. But you could also have any other book that would help your child to grow spiritually and to deepen their knowledge of God's Word. And you could also think of apologetics as a sister subject and stood out between the theology and apologetics. So your child's learning to defend their faith and understand their faith better. The TH also reminds me of the word theory. I know theory has some bad connotations for some people, especially if you're a homeschooler who's a believer. The first thing that pops in my mind is like evolution or the Big Bang Theory. But no, don't worry about all that. That's just a way to help me remember that I want to have some science-related books, whether it's a nature study-related book or just on a branch of science we're focusing on that month or that year in my basket. All right, Friday. The F in Friday reminds me to have fiction in my basket. Fairy tales, folk tales, fables, classic tales, or any favorites. I also want to add that the F in Friday reminds me of fine art. So that's a way to remember to have some type of printed art or a book of art in my basket to use for the Charlotte Mason component of picture study. And there you have it. Those are some key things you could have in your basket. Now you might have noticed I didn't name Bible because that just stands above all the rest. That's something that needs to be happening every day in our homeschool. And so I could put that in our morning basket. However, we actually do Bible at breakfast time, and there's a bit of a space between our Bible and breakfast time and our morning basket time. So I'm going to go ahead and get back to morning basket time now. And so that's the acronym, and that's a great memory aid to remember some key pieces of literature you want your kids to diet on a regular basis. Another way you could aid your memory in remembering some key pieces of literature or Charlotte Mason components to have in your basket is the truth, goodness, and beauty categories that you've probably heard about. It's very similar. It's going to lead you to have the same types of literature I just named using the WEEK acronym. So the truth category would remind you to have spiritual books, similar to the ones I named. Goodness. This category would be good to help you remember to have things about the natural world and about history in your basket. So that would be history, missionary stories, science-related literature, and things of that nature in your basket. The beautiful or beauty category would remind you to have that more abstract type of literature in your morning basket. Poetry, classic literature, fairy, fable, folk, and art. Now, how would you decide how often, how many books to read to your kids? Okay, so this year I'm going to be using a looping system. I'm going to share that with you quickly, but then I'm also going to note some other ways and just remind you that you have complete freedom in that area. I'm sure there's dozens of ways that one could do their morning basket. But a looping basket is simply when you have selected the books you want to read, usually ones like I've named, ones that have sections that could be read in isolation. A book of poetry, for example, it doesn't have a plot that you have to read all the poems sequentially. You can pick around each poem stands alone, or a book of missionary stories. Each short story stands alone, similar with all the others I've named. They don't have a plot that you have to stick with. So that means that you can loop through them. I could read one day the first book in the front of the basket. Maybe it's the poetry book, and then when I'm done with that, I put it behind. And the next day I could read the next book, a section of that, and then put it behind. And if I skipped a day, a week, or a month, it wouldn't matter. I could pick right back up and read the next book in the front of the basket and put it behind the other. Now, of course, you could decide you're going to read more than one thing in your loop each day, and then your loop would you go through your loop more times that year. Simple as that. You could decide that each morning you're going to spend an amount of time and read as much as you can in that time. You could decide you're going to read one book or two books or however many you like. In fact, I might not perfectly stick to my looping system. Let's talk about people who might want more freedom. Perhaps I may this year want to skip around. I might get to a point in my loop where we hit that book and I go, you know what? I think my kids are requesting this, or I'm feeling like I want to do a different book in our loop. So I simply can put that one behind and go to another one in the loop, and that one might get skipped that round. Any which way, right? But at least having the loop going allows for flexibility. I don't have to worry that I've skipped anything. If I've assigned it to a day of the week, then I do have to feel I skipped something. Some people might simplify their morning basket. Maybe to them it doesn't matter to have all these key types of literature, and that's perfectly fine. For some people, they might just this year focus on missionary stories and one other type of literature. And they know that eventually in the future, they'll tie in some of the other suggestions that I've named if they want to. I just want to clarify a couple things before we look through some of the titles in my basket. I'm doing my basket a little bit different in that I'm going to be each month adding in our history and science books from our units and prioritizing those to have those done each week before or in addition to doing our loop. All right, let's look at some of the titles I have in our basket. This is a book I'm using with my preschooler and my kindergarten friend that we are homeschooling this year, the Christian Liberty Nature Reader, Book K. As they do handwriting from A to Z, they'll also be able to read passages or sections about an animal that starts with that letter. You can also do a letter craft for each animal. And I have the sign of the beaver, and I'm going to stop here and tell you something that you might really want to hear. What do you do about chapter books like this? How do you fit this into the morning basket time? You certainly wouldn't want to put this in a loop because it's a plot that we need to keep up with. If I put this in the loop, it could be days or a week or more before I read it again. So I do not consider this a looping book. This goes along with our history unit. So I do one of two things. And before I do the loop or after the loop, I make sure I read a chapter of this each day or most days. Or I actually might do chapter books in the past and maybe again this year during snack and story time or lunch and learning time, where I just read it at a different time to make sure we keep up with the plot. So The Very First Americans, that's a book I pulled for our history unit this year. It's a great little introduction to Native Americans. This is also part of our history unit this month for August, Coming to America, the Story of Immigration. It's really great, and it fits right in with our Native American theme because it starts off pointing out that the first immigrants were the Native Americans who came over theoretically on the Bering Strait. And there you go, there's that word theory. It doesn't always have to have a bad connotation. The Bering Strait theory could be a pretty decent theory, and that's where we can clarify to our kids that what a theory is, and not all theories are bad things. So it goes from Native Americans all the way to how immigration is today. And it was a great opportunity to do a virtual tour of Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. All right, for our science unit this month, we're focusing on landforms and landmarks. And so the first 3 weeks we're doing landforms, and we're reading from this book, Geography A to Z. And while I read it, I have them use Play-Doh to make the different landforms that we are reading about. We'll also be learning about different bodies of water in here. And then related to landforms and bodies of water are these books. The Little Island by Margaret Wise Brown. This is Our Earth, talking about some of the different biomes or habitats in our Earth, and Where the River Begins. After landforms this month, we're going to learn or review landmarks briefly. So I'm just going to use the Children's World Atlas and focus on the landmarks of 1 or 2 continents for a few minutes. And if he's interested in any, we can look up more information online or in this book, The World's Greatest Landmarks. This one is also great simply to just look at the beautiful pictures of different landmarks. Mount Rushmore and the Statue of Liberty are 2 landmarks that I may read more about. They are covered in this book, but I have lots of picture books about them that we read in kindergarten. But these 2 particular books on Mount Rushmore and Statue of Liberty, I did not read during the kindergarten year because they're very long and detailed. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about these now and use these books now that he's in 2nd grade. And I think they'd be great for older elementary students and maybe middle schoolers as well. This book, this would be a one-time beginning of the year type of book. It's a really fun book on habit training or manners. And it has a really funny section that I'll point out to you to give you a taste. Okay, so this book talks about all kinds of manner topics in a fun, silly way. It's pretty memorable. So that's what I like about it, especially for the younger ones. Okay, so this part's about not interrupting. It's really funny. If someone wants to talk to you, listen to them until they're through. No matter if they talk till dawn, don't interrupt, look bored, or yawn. Hold your words and don't be vexed. Your turn to speak is coming next. Interrupt only if you see a prisoner running free, a porcupine who wants to play, a solar eclipse, look away, a bucking, snorting runaway horse, or a house on fire, of course. This is another little aha, so listen carefully. You might like this idea. We'll see how it works. If I have a book that like this, it's like a one-time read, or maybe I'll repeat it. I can just stick it in the loop or somewhere in my morning basket, and once I do read it, I just put it back on the shelf, and it doesn't have to be looped with. And so I can just have some fun surprises of one-time books within my loop. All right, so that M reminded me to have a missionary book. So this is Trial and Triumph. It's stories from church history, which includes missionary stories. I'm going to show you the table of contents in case you're interested. And this one is recommended by Ambleside Online, if you're not familiar with that website. So there you go. For the Tea on Tuesday, it reminds me of poetry books, and I have when we were very young. And for my younger ones, for poetry, I have the Mother Goose book, another poetry book, the very famous A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. You might have heard that title quite a few times, and maybe you've noticed that there's quite a few versions of this And what I like about this version is that it's not just Robert Louis Stevenson's works, it also includes scriptures, prayers, and other poetry from other poets. And the other thing I really like is that Thomas Kincaid is an artist, so the illustrations are his gorgeous artwork. So you're kind of getting a picture study right as you go. One's on character and moral. It's going to inspire my children. And this book we are almost done with has truly inspired my children to think about some key, things and ways to honor the Lord in their life and deal with different situations. This was another series of books we went through, and I had to do some oral editing as I read it because some of the concepts they weren't ready for. But I have a book of homonym riddles, and I will warn you that all the books by Marvin Durbin so far have a lot of witch and ghost pictures in them. So this one only had like maybe one or two, and I just honestly, I think, tore it out. What do you use to make blossom bread and petal pie? Flour, flour. So it's giving you homonyms. More idioms are commonly used phrases. Jump on the bandwagon, under the weather. It tells you what these kind of common phrases mean and kind of the history behind them and how to use it. That was fun. And then the TH in Thursday reminds me to have a book of theology. As I mentioned, last year I used, and the year before, Theology by Marty Makowski, and we finally finished that. And then this year we're going to do Heaven for Kids by Randy Alcorn. I listened to the adult book, and it was really good. So I'd seen theologically on point, so hopefully the kids one is also. I don't have it in my morning basket, but I mentioned that theology, kind of a sister topic to that, is apologetics. And actually there's a series you might really like. It's an audio drama for kids called Jonathan Park. It's supposed to kind of remind you of Jurassic Park, play on words there, because it's about a creationist scientist dad, he started to turn toward creationism, and his family starts to homeschool, and it is solid stuff, like talking about apologetics and defending the faith and the evidence for creation and intelligent design that we just see in science. And it's like really beefy stuff. The Advent Friday reminds me to have a picture study at least once a week, hopefully. And then the Advent Friday also reminds me again to have some type of classic literature. So this year we have Aesop's Fable. And then just for fun, I did a little house picture of treasury for my daughter mainly, who's 4.5. And I thought that'd be a fun one to loop with. And it's almost like history for her, but in a historical fiction. It's going to prepare her for when we do a bigger Little House on the Prairie unit when she's older with the chapter books, which I will be looking forward to with both my daughters, and my son I'm sure will enjoy them too. And I have these fun little house paper dolls, and it's really sweet. The other thing I want to mention is that our Bible time, again, to clarify, is at breakfast. So I may or may not house my Bible things in the morning basket. Our Bible time happens at the dining room table, while our morning basket time happens at our couch in our homeschool area. So that's our before morning basket, and then our after morning basket. There are two items that you could do as an extension to morning basket, and that's hymn study. That could be housed in your morning basket or kind of be an extension of morning basket time. And I have a memory work review binder, a place to house charts, songs, poems, anything your child's memorized over the years, so they each have a place to review those pieces and for your current memory work pieces. All right, well, that is our morning basket for this year. And so I hope that was helpful, that acronym and some other ways to remember key literature, and to not let it bind you like I have to read all those key pieces of literature every year because I don't know, I'm going to feel like there's gaps. No, it's not one of those things. You really don't have to. But I think that having those, whether it's every year or just being mindful throughout your homeschool years as you feel led by the Lord, or you feel, your children are interested, then, you'll just kind of have that in your mind to cover those types of literature throughout your homeschool and enjoy them.